It's your podcast. It's your call. I'm just here to do what you tell me.
Here's the pretty face, man. You're the dancing monkey.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, Mr. Benjamin Dichter. What? No, actually, do you want me to say BJ?
You say what you want, man. Just
Okay.
don't come collecting for money like the government.
Oh boy, Mr.
We have for you today one of the biggest playable characters in the entire world, in a sea of non-playable characters, in a sea of people who cannot think, who have been brainwashed, who have been told what to think, where to think, how long to think. We have BJ Dichter, one of the leaders and really the outward face of the Canadian trucker convoy in 2022, fighting for freedom and liberty for 8 billion people on the planet. And a true leader in this space, the Bitcoin space, the freedom and liberty movement. One of the smartest people that I know, really runs the gamut from politics to sound money, freedom and liberty, and understanding the dynamics and how those things all work together. And we talk about so many things: cognitive dissonance. We talk about Scott Adams, Elon, and just talking about so many of the pertinent things that are going on right now. How he thinks the elections are going to turn out, and what to look for in the elections during the campaign. What you can do locally to help improve society, and what things look like. We talk about conspiracy theories, and he rails against that, and why it's not good to think like that, and how these things actually come about, and how they happen, and what actually happens with the intelligence agencies and the government, and how things work from the inside. And he has so much insight, so much insider knowledge, people that are tipping him off even from the inside, that he has access to now since the trucker convoy. So this is a can't miss episode. I give you BJ Dichter. Enjoy.
Mr. BJ Dichter, thank you so much, brother, for coming on here. Just appreciate you more than you know. I speak for many people, I'm sure, for all that you've done, just for freedom everywhere. So thank you, brother, for spending some time with me today and being a playable character in this world. So thanks, brother.
Listen, it's my pleasure. Throughout this whole circus of everything we've all been through, one of the positive aspects is look how many new contacts and friends that we've made along the way, all over the world, all over, not just all over the United States, but everywhere. And I think there's been more good than bad that has come out of the past several years for many of us. And so I very much appreciate you and everybody else. Before the Freedom Convoy, I never talked about Bitcoin. I just stacked sats and that's it. Learned about it when I had time, which wasn't much, but I learned enough to hold it and stuff. So I never thought I'd be ever on any sort of podcast or stream or radio interviews or whatever talking about Bitcoin, because that just wasn't my MO. Just figured I'd do it, but here we are, man.
It is wild, and it's funny. Like, I have a family, the in-laws, that side, they're in Canada, in Canadian, and very, very close. We're there a lot. Spent a lot of time playing hockey. Growing, half my life was in Canada in a way, and still is, visiting family now and stuff like that. So, and I just have a love and an admiration for Canadians. We've talked about this a lot just over time, but it's like you said. I was seeing the protests go on. And we didn't even know each other yet. Like you said, it's a lot of people have come, whether it was Prime Minister Trudeau bringing people into Bitcoin, into understanding sovereignty or whatever it is, into that space, or bring people together. From a lot of bad things come good things, and I think that's kind of story of life. But what got you? Because I want to dive into that for a few minutes. What got you? Well, hold on.
Before you ask, I just want to interject here. Firstly, you called him Prime Minister Trudeau, not blackface. And blackface can't understand Bugs Bunny.
I would like for this not to get taken down, so that way we can at least reach some people, BJ. That's what we can reach one person.
Everybody calls him that. No, everybody calls him that now.
That's true.
So that's, okay.
In the dictionary, if you look it up, his picture's there. Prime Minister blackface.
All right.
Hey, just call a spade a spade. But how did you get into, like, what got you into, hey, I'm the mouthpiece for the trucker convoy? Obviously there was tens of thousands of people involved in this, probably hundreds of thousands, and you happen to be the face of it. How did this all come about?
Well, I explain it in this amazing Christmas gift for for
Great stocking
2023.
stuffer.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink at honkingforfreedom.com. But I do explain it in one of the earlier chapters where I was contacted by somebody by the name of Tamara Leach, who clearly has been a political activist for much of her life, and reached out to me and said, hey, my friends and I started started a convoy, and I had already been friends with her, so I knew she was involved in a convoy that was co-opted in 2019, coincidentally. But she said we started a convoy because of the mandates and all that sort of stuff. And I remember she said to me on the phone, she said, I love these truckers and all, but I can't have any of them go in front of the media. They don't know the traps. Nobody's media trained and stuff like that. And she knew I was producing podcasts already. That's how I met her. And she knew I ran as a candidate for the Conservatives. So, and I think she understood. I think we talked at some point about media training. I think she knew I was media trained at some point. So obviously I agreed with everything as a Bitcoiner, as somebody who is pro freedom and truth first, and everything else second. Yeah, of course I was there. I said to her, I said to her, there's only one condition, which she seems to have broken, which is no political parties. We're not there to be mouthpieces for any political party, conservative party, any other party. No. We are there. We're going there to end mandates and the ArriveCan, the data tracking app. And that's it. And she agreed to it. And I said, okay, cool. I'm in. And basically took that afternoon, finished off a podcast I was editing, cleared off my schedule, and just started working on it.
Wow. Yeah. And it's, again, on behalf of so many people, thank you for doing that and putting yourself out there. And there's really not many people better than you to do that, and kind of seeing all sides of the spectrum, being in politics, sovereignty, you kind of have run the gamut here of experience. What was it like, just being, I guess, even to writing the book? I mean, just everything from the moment you did that, you kind of dropped what you were doing in a way, and then started off on this journey. What was the, I guess, what were some of the big takeaways? Like, what was the, we talk a lot, you and I, we had the political Bitcoin hour talking obviously about Bitcoin and politics and kind of that merging, crossing the bridge between those worlds. And what was the thing that you kind of took from that and kind of learned, like, hey, this is maybe something you didn't know before about handling the politics of things? You talk a lot about the media, obviously, and how to handle the media. What are some of those big kind of aha moments you had of just that year, really, or those few months when this was all taking place?
One of the takeaways was that the ability to message around positivity and how powerful that can be if you do it well, and that you're actually able to reach people across the political aisle. That doesn't include, the activists and the bots online or whatever. I'm just talking about regular people, that there's such a vacuum for positive messaging and strength in leadership, the two together, that people are just yearning for it. And I learned how powerful that could be. From a media aspect, my thesis that it's possible to ignore the legacy media and to circumvent them with alternative media if you kind of play your cards right and understand that space and how it operates. I've said many times, when I banned the legacy media from our press conferences, I was trying to make it the alternative media's moment. I was trying to go for 100 million views that first week to make it a global phenomenon. And I would venture to say it worked, right?
Yeah.
And the other lesson that I've learned since then and through the commission, we had the Public Order Emergency Commission, which was an investigation. It was a clown show. It was all scripted. It was all set up, whatever. But it was an investigation into the Freedom Convoy.
Hey, really quick, I want to annoy the hell out of you with a quick little break to just remind you that we have to share the signal within the noise because the algorithms hate truth. The algorithm hates truth. So we have to do all that we can to spread the signal. The faster we do that, the quicker change comes to the world. We need to be the change we seek to be. What are we doing? What am I doing? What are you doing to build a future? Also, if you want a written version of a lot of what we do here, please go to the description and find the link to our blog, our Substack, as well as you will see many links to either the work or the companies, the places you can find all the playable characters here that we talk to and how you can connect with them. So now back to the show. Thank you.
And what I learned was that in Canada, and I don't know about the US yet, but I'm venture to say there's something similar, that in Canada, anytime you get 50 people together in a room to talk about politics, somebody is going to infiltrate you. If you start meeting regularly, somebody who has ties to the local riding association, those are the political associations in the districts, somebody will send somebody they know to join your movement and your group to try to co-opt it. And this is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on for some time. And that is why you never see the emergence of new political parties like you've seen in parts of Europe where they have more proportional representation and stuff.
Israel's like that too, aren't they?
What's that?
Israel's like that. Don't they have like 30 parties in Israel and stuff?
Israel's like 165 parties and nobody
really?
can agree
Wow.
on anything. So yeah, so much for the Jews control everything. If they can't even,
Yeah.
they can't even decide
They can't
what
even,
kind of cream cheese to put on their bagel, yet they're controlling the world. Like, come on, right? But yeah, so you have a structured system tied to all the political parties in Canada that's essentially a protection racket for the current political parties, which is what I've stumbled across, which is why they need to go online and try to smear myself and others who talk about it, because the last thing they need is for the populace to actually understand that no, this whole system, this is all kind of rigged, right? Yeah, you get to choose between the choices that the uniparty gives you, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a wake-up call for so many in America, probably the West in general. That's a huge thing that people, again, in George Washington here in America, the farewell address, somewhat famous, I guess, with people that are at least liberty-minded, warning everyone, hey, don't do the two-party system. You mentioned this, just locally, whether it's a group you're trying to get stuff together politically, and it's something that's meeting regularly, and you're being infiltrated. We talk about this again all the time in our weekly spaces and stuff like that, but being involved locally, right? And being the importance of being involved locally with, your wallet, not just voting, but your wallet, your feet, PTA or local education, your board meetings, stuff like that. And if just a couple % of people did that, how different things would be, your local rancher, stuff like that. So getting into is segueing a little bit into some of that, but you talk a lot about too, like the fringe candidates. We haven't been able to get into this a ton in some of the spaces, but what are your thoughts on just, we have the gerontocracy going on, fringe candidates being used by the establishment, used as weapons by the establishment. I would like you to kind of go into some of that, like how that works. And also, what are we seeing here at the gerontocracy? Should we have term limits? How do these things kind of come together? Should we have age limits? Like what are your thoughts on all of that when you look at just kind of across the spectrum here?
Yeah, so the fringe candidates and fringe influencers, the other thing, because they've now co-opted much of political YouTube, for example. So many of those people are just propped up by the establishment, and they're considered stakeholders, and they're guided in what they should and should not talk about, right? Mm-hmm. But essentially what happens is, and you see this, I call it the Alex Jones effect, because he's the same thing, is it becomes a place to park what was unveiled during the Public Order Emergency Commission. One of the ministers, who's a cabinet member, explained that they were reading back some of his communications and emails where he referred to us as the crazies. And what they do is they establish these fringe candidates or fringe influencers as a way to park the crazies, to give them somebody to yell at. And that way, the establishment politician will be better digestible and seem reasonable ultimately allowing the normies to vote for a more centrist sort of, candidate if it's in the case of a conservative, right? Like we're always
Yep.
shifting to the left. This is why. This is a part
Mhm.
of it. Because the conservatives are always trying to go to the left. You have rhinos, we have the conservative party, right?
Yep.
That's what they did with Trump. But with Trump, it failed because they didn't understand that Trump, being a career salesperson, is, as Scott Adams tries to explain to people, a master persuader. The political class didn't see that.
Mhm.
So this tactic of always using these fringe candidates to kind of park a percentage of the crazies there so they can appeal to, if they're on the conservative side, to liberal people and put forward liberal policies, all of a sudden it backfired. And then he caused Trump also caused the cardinal sin. He committed the cardinal sin of, even though he's in the wealthy elite class or whatever, he sold them out. He sold them out to the regular people because he showed them what was going on behind the scenes. So for those two reasons, that's why they hate him so much. That's why they deliberately, in my opinion, used very common persuasion tactics in media and propaganda to create Trump derangement syndrome, because they hate him so much, because he sold out the elite class and he wasn't even supposed to win.
Yeah, that's a great, it's a great point.
Yeah.
What do you, in going into this, again, it's very big. I, I don't like when people say, okay, boomer, things of that nature. Obviously, you're always going to have this divide between age gaps and things of that nature. But, it's a very real thing right now. I've often said, and we've said in the space many times, there's the hippie bubble, the people that were obviously in college or whatever in the 60s, and you had this movement. Well, now they're running society, like it or not. And, the term limits thing comes up, age limits. We just had, what, three centurions pass away basically in the last week. I think Rosalind Carter, Henry Kissinger, and Charlie Munger all in the last week. This turning that's coming, I think, is massive. And then the fourth turning, we've all kind of alluded to that. Do you think there's any need for some of those things, cognitive tests, term limits, age limits, things of that nature? I mean, when people say those things, what kind of crosses your mind when you hear that?
I think they need term limits for the bureaucracy. That's where the big problem is. Bureaucracy, deep state, whatever. You end up working for the government in any ministry, or as you guys have departments there.
Yep.
You become a senior manager, middle manager in whichever department, and you get a pension. Great. You're not sitting there for 35 years anymore. Those people need to be in and out in 10 years, because that is what allows to build the quote, the deep state, which I argue in my live streams is more about the political class aligning with the bureaucracy, aligning with big money political donors. So that's the deep state. But the bureaucracy has so much power and zero accountability to the public. Yeah, there's accountability sometimes behind the scenes that they can't violate, certain guidelines that they have within their government department. But there's zero accountability for those people who are causing chaos in our society now to the public. They need to be outed. And we have a little bit of that here. We have what's called the Sunshine List in Canada. That's people who earn more than, $120,000 and work in the government. I don't really care about that. What I care about is, what are the decisions that they're making? What changes are they implementing to the bureaucracy? Because in my opinion, in my experience, that's where the problem comes from. And in terms of like elected officials, the ones who want to hang on for 200-300 years, I think the reason is because anytime you have somebody in government who's very, very corrupt, the last thing you can have is some new guy come following you from a different political party and to see the amount of corruption that you've engaged in. So I think in the past that wasn't such a concern, because in the past, people know politics is corrupt. They understand there's political corruption. This intelligence analyst who I met many years ago. I produced a podcast, taught me a lot about, he's ex-military and retired. He taught me a lot about how
Mhm.
things kind of work, right? From the law enforcement side, and I saw on the political side. It used to be corruption, we'll take the United States as an example, would be, I don't know, the mafia would be involved. They would own the local, I don't know, garbage treatment plant and concrete, concrete, the biggest concrete company. And they would work a deal with the city council to build a bridge. And the bridge would get built. Some people would get bought off and paid, and a little bit of money goes around here and there. And, there's 20% off the top that goes to corruption and then everything else. But you know what happens at the end of the day? At least a bridge gets built. At least the community gets something for it. But now, what do they get? The community gets a report, right? Because they're all nerds. They all do reports in consulting firms. They don't build anything anymore. It was better. It was better when the mafia was there. And yeah, okay, a little corruption, but they built a bridge. Okay, fine. But now it's just a bunch of Adam Schiffs, these pencil neck nerds who are just running this shell game of consultancies that are producing reports that give nothing to the community, and that's what I think a big part of the problem is right now.
Going back to a little bit, I like the fringe candidates being used. Who would you say? I mean, again, just as you know, your guesstimation, I guess. But I mean, is someone like a Vivek, or it could be a Robert Kennedy Jr., or are those candidates potentially that are used to kind of distract people? I mean, is that kind of how you look at some of these things sometimes? Like, hey, be careful because these things could be a distraction for what's going on over here. How does that I'm trying to understand, I guess, of like you said, the Trump thing. Like, I think some people might say, well, Trump was a distraction and he wasn't supposed to win. And you're exactly right, BJ. Like, he wasn't supposed to win. They didn't think he was going to win. And all of a sudden he did win. Is that, I guess, the game you play? Like, hey, if you throw a real fringe candidate out there to kind of distract people, they could win. Like, I guess, what is the likelihood, or how do you kind of assess those situations when you see someone, when in that situation, like a Vivek or someone who's kind of wildly out there, or even a Javier Milei, obviously in Argentina?
Mm-hmm. I think what happens is often people, I mean, and this is the part that gets tricky. Sometimes these fringe candidates that are there, they're utilized to park votes from the crazies. They themselves don't know. They think, oh, some big money donor or some, I don't know, establishment political fixer or whatever reaches out and says, we really like what you're doing. We want to help you out. And they legitimately think, oh, cool. Yeah, I'm resonating with people. That's awesome. They don't realize they're being used as a pawn. So is Vivek one of those pawns? I don't know, because I think his intentions are legitimate. I think he got involved. I think there's a lot of ego with Vivek, a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the
absolutely.
primary thing. And like many of us, he was fed up, like many other people are, and figured. I mean, this is the part that really confuses me is when, people start at the top. Trump, I give him a little bit of a pass because he was in his 70s.
Mhm.
You're not going to work your way up through the bureaucracy and whatever, right? And through the
Right.
political structure. But, Vivek is much younger and starting as president, like, bro, just go become a senator, run for Congress, like, understand how this toxic environment of the deep state functions so you can maneuver and actually excel over time. But he didn't do that. He just started as president, which is weird. It's kind of like everybody wants to start at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if he is, a distraction, let's say, but to park certain voting block, he wouldn't know. I don't think he would know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it leads me to, which is something I wanted to kind of have you touch on, was just kind of cognitive dissonance in a way, whether it's the candidates themselves or the voter, and kind of not seeing that, like that, for example, that's a level of awareness where you kind of sit back and critically think and say, hey, why is he doing that? Why is he all of a sudden just like, I'm going to go be president? And it's not to say Vivek could be the greatest guy in the world and he could have all the best intentions in the world. That's not what either of us are saying. And I think that's where the bigger picture of all this and why we're in this position, I think many of us feel like, is because there has been so little critical thinking and so much apathy and indifference that it's like, whatever, there's two parties, pick the lesser of two evils, and no one thinking anything at all. And this kind of structure of, I know you talk about all the time what Scott Adams talks about, the seven levels of cognitive dissonance, and kind of going through that. I think it's such an important thing that we've just completely lost, and it kind of really sets the tone for everything we're seeing right now. What even like Adam, the 7 levels, you talk about this all the time. Is that a mental model you're constantly kind of running and filtering everything through?
Yes, when I'm dealing with somebody who's adversarial, right? Because it helps inform me of, I mean, it just tells me before I even engage, I know how the person is likely to respond, because this is how we all respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, myself as well, if I'm not watching myself. There's something I learned when I was in my teens, actually, about this idea of observing ego, being able to step back almost out of your own body and be a spirit looking down on yourself and all the circumstances around you, and trying to evaluate yourself as you evaluate other people. Like one of the things we do, we're on the road, somebody cuts us off, and what do we say? Oh, that guy's a piece of whatever, right?
Yep.
Really? Maybe the person didn't see you, or maybe the person's just having a bad day. But we end up defining that person based on one non-even interaction, and we know nothing about them, yet we come to a conclusion about an individual we don't know, that we just had a split-second interaction, and then we double down on it, right? So I use the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance when I have to engage with people politically who I know they're going to have friction, right? You'll see this probably in 2024 if I start talking from Bitcoiners, as I start talking about El Salvador, because I was not impressed at all with what I saw there. I'm very concerned about that country. And you can see it right now. Like we'll be in Vegas together. Watch.
Yep.
I'll bring it up once or twice with a couple of people.
Test it out.
And, subtly, and you'll see they're going to respond with one of the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance. And the most common one is number 2, which is an ad hominem, which is to attack you, right? But that's not the only one that's always done, right? Bitcoiners are a little bit better, to be entirely honest, I think, because they tend to be more data centric. So Bitcoiners tend to do a lot more of, changing the topic, which I get, and which is actually kind of a benefit of Bitcoin, because a lot of people in the Bitcoin space, I find, they're more amicable to people with differing opinions, which is great. We need more of that. That's why I think Bitcoin is a model from a human behavioral standpoint for the rest of the world, or at least in this modern world. But we are all still susceptible to it, myself and yourself included. And if you're suffering cognitive dissonance, you don't know. That's the worst part.
Yeah, it makes me think of, and you'll love this when I was bringing these up, but it makes me think of the Bible reading, the log in your own eye, right? Instead of worrying about the splinter in someone else's eye. And we're always most susceptible to our own cognitive dissonance. And I think that's, until we understand that, we have a hard time. In speaking of that, the El Salvador stuff, I don't know how much you want to touch on that right now. Feel free to go as deep as you want. But living abroad, you've had a lot of experience living abroad, kind of seeing things from a global perspective, being all over, whether it's Canada, U.S., or Central, South America, etc. What have you seen? I guess one thing, when it comes to Westerners, maybe like Americans, Canadians, what's the difference you see with cognitive dissonance compared to maybe someone living in Central America or South America or across the pond?
In my experience, everybody, again, this is just a human trait.
Mm-hmm.
We're human. We're confirmation bias machines, right?
Yeah.
We want to be informed that what we believe is true, no matter what, and that's just how we are. So there's a survival instinct. But in terms of the differences between Latin America and North America, because Americans always think they don't understand there's the United States of not America sometimes. I love you
Yeah.
guys. And what's really funny is when you go to Americans and they refer to Canadians as some foreign species, they don't understand our culture is the same. It's really weird. You understand that because you're from, a border state and you have a lot of
Hmm.
interactions with Canadians.
Yep.
But when you get to certain parts of the US, they don't understand that. They think Canadians are like Mexicans. It's like, no, no, no. The Anglo culture that created, well, we're going to trigger some SJWs, but I'm sorry. This is just history.
Yep.
Let's say the Anglo-French culture that initially established both the United States and Canada is one culture, and then the other culture is the Spanish and Portuguese. And there of French Guiana, and there's a bunch of other little
Yep.
smaller countries, but the majority of Latin America was the Spanish and Portuguese that settled it. And that's still a divide in the Western Hemisphere right now amongst the continent, right? So the differences are they're more cultural. So our behavior and cognitive dissonance is the same thing, but our value systems in the Anglo-French part of North America is a lot more, can I say fluid? I mean, that's what's brought in some of the leftist stuff culturally, the woke
Yeah.
progressive leftists. But it's not needed in Latin America because half of them are already communists. I'm saying that in jest, but
Hmm.
there's their
More
culture is a
open.
lot more collectivist,
Yeah.
and that's why I mean, it's kind of it's a double-edged sword when people put such value on their family. So in Latin America, it's very common that people when you're younger, you go out to nightclubs and bars and stuff like that. You go out with your brothers and sisters and cousins, and then a couple other friends. That's pretty much a foreign idea in the United States and Canada, for sure. If you're in a big city, little community is a little different, right? But in Latin America, that's the standard and that's normal because they have such a bond with family. But what's the double edge of that sword? The double edge is now they're primed to be more collectivists in their thinking because they don't think about their individual self. They think about their broader family all the time. Well, that became very easy for socialist and communist ideas to exploit to expand within all of Latin America. Finally, the leftists, the extremists, the collectivists have figured out the model that works in the Western world, which is to leverage racism or slavery or just blow out of proportion any sort of grievance from any individual community and divide and conquer. So they couldn't divide and conquer in Latin America, so they embraced the collectivist nature of family. We don't have that here, so they could divide and conquer based on race, which is what we're dealing with today.
Transitioning a tiny bit to a topic that is one of your favorites, and you talk about it all the time: conspiracy theories.
Uh-oh.
No,
Okay.
but to this point,
That's not
and
my favorite topic, but yes.
I know, exactly. It was sarcastic, and my
No, I
point
know.
with this though is neuro strikes, as I don't know if Scott calls them that. I know Nolan Bauerle does, but kind of neuro strikes, propaganda. And you talk a lot about, and you, Michelle too. I mean, you guys talk a lot about the Smith-Moon Modernization Act. I think the Smith-Moon Act was the first one 50 or 60, 70 years ago. And then the Modernization Act was 10 years ago with Obama, the Operation Mockingbird, like all these different, things. What do you, in that realm, people get caught up in all kinds of conspiracy theories, and we, not to go down this rabbit hole, obviously, but in that vein, there's obviously some prudent things to be looked at, like you guys talk about the Smith Moon Modernization Act and what's going on there, and I'll link to it in here as well so people can check it out. But what are you seeing just from that end, and how things have changed, I guess, over the decades, kind of what you dealt with the trucker convoy up until now, and even like, what do you think we're going to be seeing going forward into next year? I know it's kind of prediction that's hard to do in a way, but when it comes to just, I guess, propaganda, I don't know what a better way to say it, but just very focused, media, very focused social media, the legacy media type of content, where they're just kind of trying to direct and corral people into certain areas, similar to the obviously the candidates, what we talked about there, and just kind of weaponizing fringe candidates. But how do you think that's the Modernization Act is playing a role in what we're seeing right now?
Well, I mean, first you have to understand how bureaucrats think, right? The bureaucrats are, adherence to regulations and rules. It's really funny. That's why they want as little regulations and rules for themselves, but they want maximum regulations and rules for everybody else who wants free speech, right? Because their argument is always like, well, it puts the public safety at risk. Okay.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, my difference of opinion, and it's a friendly difference of opinion that some of us have, is my experience has been that 90% of these conspiracy theories are just that. They're just nonsense because of how government works. And look, I'm not a government apologist. I'm not an intelligence apologist. I'm just speaking practically, that these massive apparatuses that are they're governed and they so adhere to the regulations or their boundaries. And I know people don't want to believe that. People want to believe everything is Oliver Stone's JFK. I'm sorry, that's not really reality. That's not what happens. It comes from the political class. It comes from not even the politicians, usually the big donors that put pressure on politicians. Politicians put pressure on their staffers, tell them to reach out to somebody and, do you know anybody in the CIA or in the FBI or NSA or somebody who can deal with this problem? And depending on what side of the political spectrum they are, they'll interpret problems differently. And they try to leverage their pressure on these apparatuses, the government apparatuses, and then they hide when everything goes to crap, right? So I remember I was with this ex-intelligence analyst and somebody worked with when they were in the military before they retired, and I said, "Let me ask you something. What about these WMDs in Iraq? Like, what was that all about? They had the curveball guy and the witness, and it was all nonsense and it was all crap and whatever." And he said to me something to the effect, he's like, "Yeah, you've never met a politician. You don't think politicians lie? Let me explain to you how this works. We get the data. It goes through chain of command, bureaucracy, very structured. It goes to the collator and the analyst, and then the analyst and the collator tries to debunk it. They try to disprove all these hypotheses. And they get these hypotheses sometimes from politicians, other people leak stuff in, and they just go and say, sorry, this is not possible. Well, the Secretary of Defense really wants something on it. Well, sorry, this is all fake. Don't do it. This is inaccurate. Well, they interpret it differently. Well, we don't care how a politician interprets, analyst data. Are they data analysts for Intel? No, we are. We're telling you, don't do this. And then they do it anyways. And then what happens? They get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And what do they say every time? Oh, it was the intelligence failures that did it, right? He said, because the intelligence failures, or sometimes the military, sometimes police, whatever, the lowest guys on the totem pole, they're always the scapegoat for the political class. And I remember, we talked more at length about this sort of stuff, trying to learn how things go on behind the scenes. But, like I hear, let's go back to Oliver Stone and JFK. You know, his argument would be, and there's other people as well, that the CIA, a bureaucracy, took it on its own to assassinate JFK. And what's his name? Dulles, I think it was his name, was the
Yeah,
one
director.
who basically was head of the CIA at the time. And, you know, he was leveraged to be the person to oversee the Warren Commission to basically ensure that nobody would find out what happened. You know why? I can tell you exactly who killed, this is my opinion, who killed who assassinated JFK. It wasn't the CIA. You know who it was? It was the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. The two of them together probably were exploited through fear and hysteria that he's going to destroy the country. He has to be gotten rid of. Somebody's got to there's got to be somebody in the government who can deal with this somehow. And then you have mass hysteria that fuels itself over a few years. And before you know it, they get to such a stage of irrational rage that a few of them collude and decide, like, okay, we really don't want to do this, but we have no choice. You hear this all the time. People who get radicalized. We have no choice but to do it. So it was the entire establishment that did it. It wasn't, you know, just one three-letter agency or just one guy. And in my experience, seeing how political parties operate, that's exactly how they operate. They're completely dysfunctional. Most of the people are completely incompetent. They're governed by whisper campaigns. It's weird. It's like a cult where everyone hates each other. And they're waiting till the guy next to him can be stabbed in the back, and they'll do that to take their place. It's a really weird atmosphere. And, well, if those are the type of people, then it's not a stretch to say that perhaps they leveraged some of this hysteria, and maybe it was all accidental. Maybe people just started spreading rumors that he's got, you know, connections to people he doesn't, and everybody panicked and freaked out. And there's no bad guys in this story. They just fell victim to hysteria, and that's what happened. That's what sounds logical to me, at least. I could be completely wrong, right?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that too. I mean, I think the conspiracy theory word too gets tossed around so much, and ironically, here we are, 1964, I believe was the first time it was used really publicly by the New York Times because of the JFK stuff, and it was anyone who was questioning that was labeled a conspiracy theorist, and it gets tossed around so much now, no one even really knows what it means. But I agree with you in the sense that I think a lot of it is these directed media campaigns, like you said, whether it's from the politicians, the left, the right, them together, the uniparty, and them conjuring up so much fear that their outcomes tend to happen, right? Like they're, you know, it kind of goes into the Hamlin's razor you talk about all the time, but it's their outcomes just tend to happen. It's like, oops, someone finally did what we kind of wanted them to do. Like that helps us. Great. That helps centralize government and give us more and more power. They're not actively saying, hey, you go do this. It's they're creating the environment for these things to fester and happen. And it's like, oops, it happened. This thing happened. And that's what it feels like. And I think that's where so many of us search for like the exact thing, the exact person, and we're just searching for something. But it's really like this macro thing. Like even Nixon, I don't know how much you know about Nixon either, but it feels like the JFK thing, Nixon, and then Trump, like the three guys that are kind of set up and kind of assassinated in different ways. Like the JFK paid his life,
and
Nixon,
and I think that's why, even though it's so many years in the future, that the bureaucracy does everything they can to make sure the truth doesn't come out. You know why?
Mm-hmm.
You know what the American people would learn? They'd learn how incompetent they are. And I think that's what they're worried about. It would delegitimize them as institutions in U.S. government, because it would show that they are so easily susceptible to mass hysteria, just like everybody else.
So how do you think, and I want to go down some of those rabbit holes in a minute, but like Bitcoin for a second, do you like, what are again, Bitcoin fixes this, right? Like, what do you think Bitcoin, the money part, really starts fixing? Is that it just makes me think of that immediately. Like, the politicians are competent. A lot of people know that. Most Bitcoiners know that, and that's why they're in Bitcoin to a large degree, looking around and saying there are no good options. Politics is not the way. What do you think politics looks like? Like you said, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, where do you think we start heading because of, and it's not just the money necessarily, but it's decentralized media with the Nosters of the world and all these different things that are coming online where we can now communicate. We don't have to be under the guise of just the New York Times or whatever it might be, but we have this a way to communicate now. The toothpaste feels like it's out of the tube, and these younger generations, the gerontocracy, a lot of them going away. It just feels like, man, we're in for some massive change in the coming decades.
I think there's so many different things. I mean, in all of that, there's so much. One is,
Yeah.
I think, I mean, definitely in the parliamentary system, you guys might be a little bit better, but I think we're just dealing with an antiquated system that was designed for the 17th century. That's a problem. And we live in the digital age. And these institutions, the reason they're becoming so big is because they're analog. They need to be replaced, or they need to be made significantly smaller and utilize digital technology to do what it, if it's, I don't know, Veterans Affairs
Yes.
or institutions that deal with homelessness and whatever. You don't need 100,000, employees. You need 10,000 effective employees. Half of them are developers who understand the digital age and can systematize things. It's so infuriating to see that people, as a conservative, I get it. They want to harken back to tradition, but sometimes traditions need to be left to history, because if not, then the system ends up eating itself, which is, I think, what's happening right now. But I also think something else. Stephen Hicks talked about this in, I think it was an interview with, who was it with? Oh, it was with Glenn Beck. And they were talking about free speech and social media and all that sort of stuff. And this is maybe a little bit of a positive white pill, might be for too much for some people, but I think he's onto something. And he basically said, I'm going to paraphrase his ideas, but he basically suggested he thinks the problem is this is just the first period, and he's a long-term historical thinker. This is the first time in human history where we've had instant communications to anyone all over the world. And as a species that's lived for tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands, whatever it is, depends on it depends on scientific perspectives, but it's going to take time for us to evolve in terms of our thinking to understand what's fake and what's real, what's just propaganda, what's not. That's why I talk about it in our spaces all the time. So why Scott talks about this stuff and many other people in these domains, because this is part of the learning journey where we have to learn that, hey, guess what? Just because it's in legacy media doesn't always mean it's fake, although it usually is. But also at the same time, just because you read it on the internet doesn't mean it's real either. But because it's a new phenomenon in our society, people are more apt to believing things if they read it on the internet. It's like the skepticism for some people, it just turns right off. It's really weird. We saw a lot of that during COVID. Some friends of mine who are very hardcore anti-vax got let's just say difference of opinion. But I tried to explain to them, I'm like, listen, the internet is a confirmation bias machine, as well as you are a confirmation bias machine. If you want to find data or studies or meta-analysis or whatever to prove your point, you will. And if you want to find that same sort of data to prove the opposition's point, you will. But you don't try to do that. None of us do. We always try to prove what we already think we know as truth, but we don't try to disprove it and prove the opposite. Because guess what? Sometimes there's things you just don't know. I'll give you an example. I just did a stream earlier today, and I talked about that quote, terrorist attack that became a car accident at the border at the Rainbow Bridge. Okay. And turns out it was a couple. They were driving a Bentley, looks like it was a Continental GT. And, you know, however fast he was going, 85, 100 miles an hour, and hit a fence and the thing exploded. Well, the fake news reported it immediately, which is why I and so many people jumped on it to say that it was a terrorist attack. They said, you know, a car detonated with explosives at a booth. That wasn't true. That wasn't even remotely true, not even close, right? But if you look at the data, you look at the data, you look at the circumstances, and you do you step back, do the 50,000-foot view, and think about it over time, and start to put it together. What can you start to think? Well, it's an expensive car. Bentleys are amongst the most expensive. I explained in my stream, I used to have a friend that was a manager at Bentley. Their client base are overwhelmingly in the 60s and 70s, very wealthy. Many of them are overweight. So what is that? That is prime for, or let's say a higher percentage possibility of cardiac arrest. Because I don't know any system in an internal combustion engine car that would cause it to accelerate. When an internal combustion car fails, the first thing it does is fail and stop. It's not the opposite. You know, the momentum. Anyways, entropy.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was going full. So, okay, cardiac arrest, guy's having a heart attack, I don't know, goes unconscious, foot hits the gas, his wife's in the car, doesn't know what to do, doesn't realize, put in the first gear, blow the engine, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And now you have this accident, but I guess because the remains are so, let's say, damaged out of respect, that's one of those things we may never know what happened. And I'm okay with that. Sometimes we just don't know. But we become so addicted to this idea that we think we can know the cause and result of everything. And that's just not reality. And that's what causes the conspiracy theories. The last thing I'm going to say about this, with this same intelligence guy, a retired intelligence guy, I asked him, you know, about Jewish conspiracies. Tell me about this. Like, what's causing all of this? And that's where he explained to me that they see it as a leading indicator of potential extremism in a society. That's why the intelligence services and law enforcement monitor anti-Semitism, not because the Jews are controlling the world. It's because they're just known for running businesses and being pretty quiet to themselves. And when they see a rise in anti-Semitism, they think, okay, are we going to start to see militias in different areas, right? The society is unhealthy because our politicians are useless. Something's going on, right? But I asked him, so explain what's fueling it. He said, it's pretty simple. It's human nature. We don't like to accept complex ideas or the fact that there's things we just won't know. So what do people do? They look for the simplest explanation that's unknowable and unprovable, and to say, there you go, there's your problem. Because as human beings, we need to know there's a good guy and a bad guy. That's where the danger is. But unfortunately, it just gets a little miswired. And then you end up with really silly conspiracy theories. And it's very frustrating. And that's where I run into the most amount of the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, well said. Well said. It's so important to understand that. And like you said, Scott Adams talks about it all the time. You talk about it all the time. There's so many good people. I could do a whole thing just on Scott and hypnotism and all that stuff. That'll be for a different time. Maybe next week. Who knows? Just digging into that. What really quick though, you mentioned free speech stuff. I just saw a clip of Elon earlier. Him telling, I think it was Andrew Sorkin or whatever it was, GFY, I don't care, pull all your advertisers. Like, I don't care. I literally don't care. What is your take on Elon? I'm speaking of cognitive dissonance, I'm kind of in between with him. I know there's so many people that love him. There's so many people that hate him. To me, I think he's one of the most brilliant people out there. but then I also see, you know, all the government help he's got, and this guy controls, one man controls feeding thoughts to your brain through Neuralink, space travel, you know, satellites, electric cars. Seems like very centralized, especially for a Bitcoiner looking at it. I'm like, man, this guy is very centralized. You change one person and you capture this one guy. You got a lot of society captured. The free speech, obviously, Twitter, X, what's going on here. What is your thought on him? Because I'm kind of indifferent. I don't know which way to take him, quite honestly.
I think, okay, so first on the issue of centralization, I had this conversation with, I hope he doesn't get mad at me. He won't. I had this conversation with BTC Sessions when we were having lunch together at Bitcoin Miami last year. And we were talking about, you know, just philosophy and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, he's, as you can know, nobody's going to accuse him of not being a Bitcoiner, right?
For sure.
But, you know, like we had a lot of things in common, like a lot of, you know, world views, which is not uncommon amongst Bitcoiners. And I remember he said to me, you know, we're discussing centralized versus centralized, decentralized, whatever. Like we obviously decentralization is very important to us. For Bitcoin, that is kind of that's the most important thing. But then he says, you know, at the same time, like this conference, I mean, how did this conference happen? It was centralized because you got to have somebody who's going to rent the space. You got to have somebody who's going to do the marketing. You got to have a team that's going to do whatever. Like you got to divide it up, and it's a central entity, which in that case is Bitcoin Magazine, that runs the conference. And I think we sometimes get pushed a little too in the extremes and thinking because we love what decentralization has done for Bitcoin and not understanding our species and how we behave. And sometimes we do need an element of centralization just for complex tasks to get things done, right? But it gets out of control with government right now. So that's the first, the centralized versus decentralized. As far as Elon Musk is concerned, I think what a lot of people struggle with, and I think there's a lot of us, like I have this in common with him as well. I think there's a lot of people who do, more people than ever. I'm not gonna say I don't care about money, but I'm not fueled by money. I really don't. Like I've been very fortunate to have grown up. Yeah, my family was middle class, but all of my friends were the wealthiest people in Canada. So I've, you know, whole life I grew up around very, very wealthy people. And, you know, you kind of get out of your system a little bit and you realize they have the same problems as everybody else. So I never chased wealth, right? I always chased experiences. That's why, as you said, I've lived all over the world. I've done different
Yep.
things. You know, the Convoy was not, you know, it was probably the thing that you guys know me for, but there's a bunch of other stuff that I've tried to do and different entrepreneurial projects and whatever, because I chased the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Musk is the same way. When he was saying, you think you're going to blackmail with money, blackmail with me with money. Remember he said that?
Yep.
I think what he's trying to say is, I don't give a shit about money. I want to go to the moon. And money's maybe the tool that, instead of the moon, the Mars. He's fueled by wanting to go to Mars and wanting to make our species interplanetary. You know, that interview he did with Babylon Bee, everybody should watch. You get a lot of insight to how he is philosophically watching that speech when he explains, like, and you can tell he's almost annoyed. And I know some wealthier people, I understand how it can be so annoying for them. But, you know, he said, everybody walks around like I got a pile of cash in the bank. Like, that's not how it works. Like, have a business and the business has the evaluation. The money's all artificial. Like, I'm not sitting there with $20 billion in the bank, but people just can't figure that out. And so, yeah, that's why, you know, when you say he uses government programs, well, yeah, wouldn't you? I mean, if you wanted to build a rocket ship and go to Mars, in the world we live in today, do you really have any choice? I remember going, and this really frustrated me so much. I went to, it was a free speech conference, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago. And there was a libertarian professor, or at least he claimed he was libertarian, that was talking about Tesla, and he was bashing Elon Musk and bashing a whole bunch of other things and whatever. And okay, fine. And I, rose my hand at the end. And I said, I just want to ask you something because, listen, I'm really libertarian. Like, I get it. But again, there's no single philosophy that has all the answers. I'm sorry, guys. Libertarianism isn't the answer for everything. Liberalism isn't the answer for everything. Conservatism isn't the answer for everything. And all these philosophies make mistakes. But anyways, I asked this professor, I said, you gave this example of electrical grids and Tesla and big businesses and whatever. What about the fact that there's a barrier of entry that if I decided I wanted to build my own electrical infrastructure, the barrier of entry is so vast, it's just not possible. It won't happen. And his response to me, typical, some professors, they say some ideas are so easy, even an academic can understand them. This guy wouldn't, because he said to me, well, I don't buy the premise. I'm like, what do you mean you don't buy the premise? Okay, you want me to give you a business plan right now? I'll do a business plan right now that you're going to need to build your own nuclear facility and infrastructure and permits and whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And it'll cost you, I don't know, $30 billion. So tell me, oh, I don't buy the premise of the barrier of entry. He just parroted that over and over again, dismissively after 2 points, then went on to the next question, right? So in our world today, where there is so much centralization, and I'm hopeful it's going to be pulled back. So I'm very, Millet, I think, is just the beginning. There's going to be a lot more, and we're going to go a lot more towards a libertarian society. But if you're Elon Musk and you want to go to Mars, and there are all these government programs, and let's not forget, he also put his own money into it. He put his own money into Tesla, and he almost lost everything, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he was on the verge of bankruptcy, like, I don't know, 90 days away or whatever it was. So I think he's paid his dues, right? And irrespective of whether he uses government infrastructure and government things, we would all do that. We would have no choice. And I think that's the best way. But I just don't think he's fueled. I might be wrong. Maybe he's just a good spinster and I don't realize it. But I don't think he's fueled by money. I think he's fueled by certain goals. I think he's fueled by doing things that on the 50,000-foot view might be good for humanity long after his passing. I think that's and he's, a sci-fi nerd like the rest of us and likes to bring in all these technologies that we grow up reading and Abramovich books and stuff like that. So I think that's what's doing it.
Yeah, you can only hope so at the end of the day, right? I mean, that's it seems like it is, and just
what's the alternative?
Going that
he's
way.
Like a doctor. What's the alternative? He's a Dr. Evil in disguise? Like, come on, I don't think so.
Yeah, so my 50-50, like the with it is that so much of it that he controls, right? Is can the government come in? Like here, like for example, he's out there taking pot shots at Bill Gates 2 years ago, right? And like that's cool if it's like Johnny in his basement living at his parents, and like okay, whatever, the guy gets his account censored. I mean, when you're like degrading someone or making fun of their whatever, like there's things that like the average person can't get away with, or he could, or he is getting away with, which no one else, even at high levels, people can't get away with. Look at Trump, for crying out loud. Now he's at it's a different thing, obviously, or he's a president and Musk is not. But like Trump, I mean, he can't say one word without all of a sudden the media, everything is just all after him. And people are after Musk too. However, when you're going after whoever, the Klaus Schwabs, the Bill Gates, these high level people, the Soroses, and that a lot of people think pull punches and kind of control a lot of what's going on. It just makes you wonder, like, why is he not being come down on from these guys, and he can just do like just out there taking liberties on people, and you're like, that just doesn't add up when I see all these other people doing it. It's just like they're canceled. It's whatever. And again, it's Elon Musk. Hard to cancel him because he owns a lot of things and he's a great marketer and great brander. It's just like a lot of those, I don't know, call them anecdotal, a lot of like things you kind of put together and you're like, he owns a lot of the communications structure, infrastructure, all these things. Where could the government take those things over? Neuralink, all these things that they've talked about it for decades. I'm like, hey, we're going to do this, or they do movies about, which kind of like set the tone for like, this is what's going to happen in the future. That to me is kind of what's weird about it, why he's kind of allowed to do a lot of this stuff, or like to the government grant thing. And why I brought that up is because
Mm-hmm.
why are they allowing him to, why are they giving him the government grants, right? If they're not in on it somehow, right? If you're giving someone the money or you're putting them in debt, like we see at the IMF with Argentina or all these other countries around the world, they're not giving the money just saying, hey, just here, have some money. They're saying, hey, here's the money, but you're going to do this, 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 and this. You're going to give us these resources. And that's where, to me, it's like, hey, when you're taking it, I agree. I think everyone would do the same thing. They're going to take the money from the government. If you can get the grant, you can get whatever it is. But it leads you to, okay, what's the opposite of that? It's okay, what is he agreeing to that we don't know about? And that's where you start going down these roads and thinking like it seems too easy for him in a way, and it's not. I mean, I'm not trying to make this like he's one of the greatest entrepreneurs of all time, doing what he's doing and saying, hey, we're going to Mars, and letting nothing get in his way seemingly. It's hard to wrap your mind around, and maybe it's just so far above my head that I'm just a hockey player. I'm just a pleb. So I don't know. Hopefully that made sense. It's just like there's so much to it. And you're just like, man, he's out there taking liberties on some of the wealthiest people in the world, like making fun of their weight and things like that. You're like, man, it just seems off. But then yet the government's over here, like, yeah, here, have another 10 billion or 100 billion and like go to Mars and like do this stuff. And I guess the moral of the story is, if you and I are doing this, like we're talking about getting canceled because we said a certain word on YouTube, like if we go and say, hey, we're going to Mars and blah, blah, blah. Is the government going to allow us to do that? But he's taking pot shots. He's not towing the company line, yet he's seemingly, they're not stopping him along the way. I guess that's where my cognitive dissonance, or like that gap is. I'm having a hard time filling that gap with, oh yeah, here's the bridge to connect those things, where government's just letting him do that. They're giving them the stamp to go to the launch rockets, and they're like he's put satellites in space, but yet he's over here taking pot shots on them every day. He's attacking the government. He's attacking, the Bill Gates, the financiers, the donors. Like it's something. It just makes me like wonder, and I guess hopefully that makes more sense, I guess, at the end there, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm looking for this. Oh, maybe I found it here. I've been looking for this study that came out, or report or article from a few days ago. No, that's not it. It's because he's politically the master of leverage. He's really good at this. He would be really good at, I mean, look, a business at that level, it becomes politics.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
I don't remember the study. It was something like Musk in total, like the businesses that he runs, so Tesla, SpaceX, and all the other ones in Twitter or whatever. Yep. Twitter's a small one. This isn't really, it's new. It's not even profitable yet. But all the businesses that he runs at this point equates to something like over almost 2% of the U.S. GDP.
Yeah.
That if it weren't for Musk, then the U.S. government would be showing negative growth for their GDP, which is like the number one. It's like the only indicator politicians pay attention to. It's really odd. And so he has enough leverage that he can say what he wants. And now he built Twitter because he couldn't say what he wanted for a little while. And you can tell, remember, the evolution of Musk politically, his political philosophy, at least how he presents himself. You could see he got increasingly frustrated, along with the rest of us, with this structured and scripted censorship, the censorship model that we're living under. And so that's kind of how I see it. And is from a political perspective, he just knows that he has maximum leverage now. And what also gives him leverage? And people, I don't know if people realized it, when he said he sold his house or houses, whatever it was, and he moved into a teeny house or tiny home on the property of SpaceX. You know what that means? They have zero leverage on him now, right? All of us, like everybody in policing, all those police officers, like in Ottawa, well, most of them were rookies or just sworn in, but there were a small handful of a-holes in the Ottawa and other police forces that were just leftist maniacs that were there, rounding us up and arresting us. But the reason so many police officers often do what they don't want to do It's because they have this amazing leverage over them, which is their mortgage. They can't get fired. If they get fired, they can't pay their mortgage. They can't feed their family. Like that is the serfdom that we have in our society today. He doesn't have that. I don't
Yeah.
have that. A
Yeah.
few of us who don't have it, we're the ones who have free speech.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to some of that point, I think of Russell Brand, Bill Maher, Joe Rogan. Some of these people that were, maybe way left or centered left, and now, at least in the American sense of political spectrum, and now have seemingly come to the center or center right, what have you, and really starting to question all these things that are going on out there. Elon probably in that ilk as well, right? And like you just alluded to, what do you think who are people that you watch and kind of who does BJ get his information from? Like, obviously we talked about Scott Adams. There's Tucker, maybe Glenn Greenwald, Cernovich, Michael Schellenberger. Like who are the people that you kind of watch and say, hey, these guys have a good pulse of what's going on. I want to kind of stay close to these guys.
Not too many, to be entirely honest. Like I do, there's a platform that I was on, Lotus Eaters, and
Yep.
that's Carl Benjamin and Connor and Dan and Stelios and the rest of the guys. I really like their platform. I really like what they do. But in a lot of stuff, especially the political stuff in Canada, uh, I get a lot more information leaked to me than you realize, than a lot of people realize. Like I have a lot of people sending me stuff, and not just about Canada, about other places, right? Which is why
Yep.
sometimes, I have my Substack that I talk a little bit about stuff, but I haven't gotten into a lot of detail yet, and I will soon. By the way, bjdichter.substack.com.
Yep. Yeah, we went to that.
And I have a couple of friends who have independent media companies, one that I'm involved in. But I guess I'm at this weird place where I'm just getting lots of people sending me direct, first count information on different issues around the world that I don't really go to Tucker Carlson for his opinion, right? Yeah, I like Tucker on a lot of things. There's some things that I completely disagree with. Like everybody, which is good. It's always good to disagree with some people on some stuff. But yeah, who else do?
If, well, and when you
Yeah,
see,
like
if you're, while you're thinking of more, I mean, do you see, like, say you get information that might be, come to you, which is probably a lot of times firsthand or very close to the source a lot of times, and people giving it to you in confidence. If you see all of a sudden, like a Tucker or a Cernovich or someone else now talking about that, does that really kind of like go off in your head as like, oh, okay, there's really something there where you kind of have that almost a confirmation bias in a way, but like kind of the confirmation of like, oh, this is real. Like now if it's spreading to there and we're seeing it in multiple places, at least in my head, that's like the pattern recognition of like, okay, I've seen this in 4 different places. There's some smoke here. Is that kind of how you think about things as well?
no, not really. I try to, certain stuff I want to, whether it's true or not, or to determine if it's true or not.
Mm-hmm.
I like to have it come from sources from across the political spectrum as much as possible. Not
Yep.
legacy media because it's all corporate stuff's paid off. But if you see, left wing alternative media is talking about something, maybe they're yelling at it, but at least they're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the right wing talking about it, and somewhere in between the libertarians talking about it, then yeah, it's probably true. Um, but I actually spend a lot of like when I, okay, what you're asking when I have the little bit of downtime that I have
Yeah.
before I go to sleep or I'm doing stuff or whatever, like what am I watching? I'm usually watching history or ancient history. I find you learn a lot more learning about what happened in the past, and you see the same tactics because we're human behavior is based on patterns as well. You see a lot of the same issues and then responses and proposed solutions throughout history that you do today. There is, I'll plug Lotus Eaters for a second. There is one of the podcasts they have that's run by Bo. His YouTube ID is History Bro One, and he's got a YouTube channel called History Bro. And like you talk about an amazing communicator on history and relevance to the modern world. Another one that was really good, I don't know if he's still around, but Lewis Lapham. I used to I read Lapham's Quarterly all the time. I used to listen to The World in Time, which was a program that Lewis Lapham hosted, which basically took a period of history, something that's going on right now, and compared it to a period of history in the past. And I find that if you understand human behavior politically in the past, or how things operated in the past, and propose solutions and failures and whatever, it becomes a lot easier when you see something on Twitter to understand. Oh, yeah, okay, that's not happening. That's not true. Because just you just know how people behave. You see, and now you can see the fake news stories a mile away. The reason the one at the border with the car, that example, took us all so much, because it was perfectly lined up with what has happened in Israel on October 7th and the protests since then.
You're primed for it.
Right?
Yeah.
So we were perfectly primed for it. And that's why, we all took the bait, unfortunately. And we're all going to do that. And that happens sometimes too. But yeah, Lotus Eater's Epochs is an amazing resource for history.
Yeah.
Because they have a series where they're talking about the different kings of England and different figures in England. Well, English politics 300-400 years ago ain't all that different from what's going on in the United States and Canada right now, and Europe. So those are my sources. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes me think of I don't know who said it now. I don't know if it was Churchill or somebody, but it was just, many people go throughout time, but the further you look into the past, the further you can see into the future. And that's probably why we get along a lot too, just because of being history buffs. And it's so important. I think a lot of Bitcoiners are, quite honestly, right?
And also remember, in my case, we're all informed by our education, right? And, I know you're definitely, and I have so much respect for people of faith like yourself, especially in building a family, and faith is important to you. And I went to a school where I learned faith from a very young age. But the difference is I went to a Hebrew school, and we learned eventually Talmud and Mishnah and Torah and all that stuff, which goes back 3, 4, 5,000 years. I think calendar, I think we're at the year 58 or something like that, right? So and I remember when I used to go to synagogue with my family, was when I was maybe my teens, I started to read it. You have kind of the prayers are in Aramaic or Hebrew, depending if it's Torah or the Talmud. But then, they always had these sections on every page in English where it contextualized, the prayer that you're reading, that's being recited, and why that prayer exists. And often it was, there would be a rabbi that was in the middle country in Europe, indescript at this point, Eastern Europe, in the year 600, and there was conflict with the local community that was, as always, rounding them up and all that sort of stuff, and they were being targeted and stuff like that, and how the rabbi dealt with the adversarial community, how he communicated with them and got them to leave them alone, and some of the violence that went on. So there's always this context, and that once that dispute was settled, they wrote a prayer to say during this service to always remember the victims, try to be kind to people, like all that sort of stuff, right? I'm giving a really general example that's not accurate, but you get the general feel and idea. And I guess just going through all those years, when I was in synagogue reading that sort of stuff too, you also learn that, once again, what happened in our history is not all that different from today. And in terms from the technology stuff with AI and Bitcoin and all that sort of stuff, probably the documentary series that most influenced me most of my life was these series of documentaries by James Burke called Connections 1, 2, 3. He also had The Day the Universe Changed and a few others, which is about the history of technology and how technology evolves. And if you understand that, even though a lot of it is editorialized and his opinion, may sometimes disagree, but when it comes to those opinions, is laid out very, very simply. So, well, logically, so you can kind of get a sense of how the world is going to evolve technologically. It's not all that different from all the technological innovations that occurred in the past. This thing here, this, or here, I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
This is technology, right? Writing is technology. A book is technology. Printing is technology,
Printing press,
right? Yeah. So we've been through all of this stuff before, and we'll be through it again in the future. I hope I haven't rambled too much, but go back to Bitcoin. You're gonna say?
No, I love it. I mean, that's exactly where I kind of want to go with that. I know we're been going for a little while here, and kind of wrap on two things here. There's so many things, over time we'll do more of this as well, and we'll wrap on many more things. But I'm going to be somewhat timely today, or so it'll be 3 hours from now. So in transitioning a little bit, what, like, for Bitcoin, what are we just talked about this the other day, like, what do we really want for Bitcoin? Because it's the legal tender fight, right, with Malay and Bukele in El Salvador, and Bitcoin, you're taking every win you can too, right? Like, hey, it's they're on the mouth of the politicians. Bitcoin, the word is on the mouth of the politicians, and the Barbara Streisand effect, where people are hearing it and they're starting, okay, what is this? DJ, Satoshi the other day, or months ago, bringing this up, like, no, we want it from the ground up. And you talked about this. I even had Stephen Kinsella on Twitter say that even the founding fathers, writing down our natural rights, taught people that those rights were still given by leaders and trained them to see their freedom that way, which it's not a bad argument, to be quite honest. And this understanding of, like, where do we really want things, like even the SEC, again, using the SEC, the enemy of my enemy type of thing, and leaning on the SEC that, oh, we're good. How do you see Bitcoin in terms of, is it, we need that bottom up foundational growth, and that's really going to drive politics or downstream of culture? Or is it, your mind, hey, it's great if we get all these countries to make it legal tender, then we're really going to have, what really tips the scales in your terms? And coming from someone who saw firsthand Prime Minister Blackface doing what you guys did, and probably orange pilled millions of people, quite honestly, because of what he did. So what is your thought? Like, where does this kind of call come together for you?
I don't really engage much in we did a little bit yesterday in Political Bitcoin Hour, talking about is it important for legal tender or not, or whatever. And I think it was the first time I really talked about it, but I don't really like to talk about it all that much, and there's a reason for that. I think our framing of the world is completely wrong. I think talking about legal tender, not legal tender, making it legal for transactions, whatever, I think that's a 1950s framing of the world. And I think the world is going to change so much that even the definition of what is money and what is value doesn't fit the type of world we're going to move into. This is why I like that presentation I saw from everybody. I understand how people don't like this guy. I don't get it. But Jason Lowry, he gave a presentation. He explained that Bitcoin, there's the money layer, but there's so many other things that are going to come on top of it. And that, like, I like him because he speaks to the political class. I think he'll be the strongest voice for orange pilling the political class, the bureaucracy, right? And I know if you haven't dealt with it a lot, it's hard to conceptualize, and I get that. That's why I don't really argue with people on it. But I mean, money, or, gold is a hard asset, right? Something you can touch. You can feel it. It's tangible. Dollars, it's somewhere in between, because it's just a piece of paper that represents, or it's supposed to represent, something tangible. No longer gold. The tangible thing is, I don't know, our work ethic, something like that, right? I think Bitcoin is something completely different. We don't really understand what it is, because it's a protocol. What does that mean? Protocol that stores value. That's why you see a lot of these, some people think they're little airy-fairy conversations. What is value? What is money? Like Breedlove does the What is Money podcast. And I think he's rightfully trying to explore the philosophy of what is money, because I think that definition of what money is going to be something completely different 100 years in the future. I think what they got wrong with Star Trek was, this in the Star Trek universe, there was no money, right?
Mm.
I think what they didn't know was there is money in, it's a fictional universe, but just play along with me for a second. Suspension of disbelief. That if there was a real Star Trek universe, there would be money, but it would be the nature of what Bitcoin is. And what does that mean? I don't know. I think society is on this philosophical exploration, and things are changing so fast, right? Like James Burke in 79, I think was the day the universe changed, if I'm not mistaken, talked about in the future you're going to be able to send a message instantly on somebody on the opposite side of the planet directly from wherever you're standing anywhere in the world. And all us normies like, what are you talking about? That's not possible. That's exactly what we're living in today. But who's going to be the genius or the person with foresight like that who can explain what does money mean in 300 years in the future? I do like this comment that Scott brings up. Do you really think in 300 years people are going to be trading pieces of paper? That's not happening.
No.
So what are we doing then, right? Maybe our little end of the protocol becomes our identity, that we get interconnected with it somehow. I don't know. But I think there's a much broader philosophical question that needs to be answered the 50,000-foot view. And we're all struggling just to understand what the question even is. That's how early we are into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, I've gone through these mental gymnastics as well as mental thought experiments of just, does money exist in 100 years? And you kind of touched on that. Like we're operating from such a limited knowledge base of like what things are truly going to look like with the exponential growth of like technology and AI and all these different things. Like, yeah, do you think AI machines are going to be trading gold back and forth? No, of course not. And it's hard to envision that. All right. In wrapping here, there's so many things, like I said, we'll say for other times, whether next week and beyond. But I wanted a quick breakdown. And again, we've tried to talk about this in the political Bitcoin hour of political entryism, and kind of wrapping back around to politics a little bit and finishing. So political entryism, and then also leading into this campaign season and what's happening in the election season, kind of how those things work. And I'll remind you as we go here, but how these things kind of work and what people should expect and how people can, again, make an impact, obviously in not just voting with their wallet, or their vote, but, wallets, whatever, but the kind of the strategy and what we're looking at, what kind of assault on our brains are we going to be seeing here from the media, and what's going to be happening that really the next 12 months, not even 12 months now, geez, less than 12 months from now. So political entryism into like, how can people prepare for this campaign, the next 12 months into the election next year?
Wow, you saved the longest question for the end. My God.
We can always do part 2 next week or something.
Political entryism in itself is a long
could be a whole
process
show
to talk about and explain. Yeah, but I mean, the first thing is political entryism is the process of subverting political organizations or groups to change them from within, sort of thing, right? That is very slow, laborious, even through generations sometimes, depending on what the topic is. That's what I think Bitcoiners should be doing, is if you want to get involved politically, then you get involved and try to orange pill people who are within the political scene. And it takes forever, right? But you build a coalition, you have other Bitcoiners, you train them, you get them to join other, I don't know if you have riding associations or districts or the local, Republican or Democratic or even Libertarian political party, and you'll spend your whole life doing that, and then you won't see any results from it. The results are going to come in the long term, right? So yeah, that's I don't know, a political entryism over. We'll talk more about that
Yeah, that's.
in a
I wanted a
political Bitcoin
brief.
hour or space, or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what it is. That's also why you see so much protest funded by Islamist groups all over the Western world right now, because they've used political entryism to basically recruit and train radicals, and then radicals get involved in different student groups, or they get jobs within the government or NGOs, and then they turn the NGOs, right. Famous one is Amnesty International, right? That's why Amnesty International sounds like just a woke monster, and has nothing to do with amnesty or human rights, right? So that's one end of it. In terms of going into the election, I think it depends on your perspective, right? If your perspective is like I view it, like, oh, it's just a game. Like when I see some of the messaging, sometimes I engage because it's just fun. It's
Yeah,
just funny to, my friend got into it with Andrew Tate,
that's
Imam
right.
Tate, and what's
Yep.
his idiot brother, and
Yep.
it's, I mean, that's just fun, right? But if your perspective is that you get emotionally involved, and you treat politics as a sport, then you're going to be really anxious for the next year. If your perspective is, yeah, there's just a lot of people playing games and lying to everybody, and that's just fine, that's just the game, but let me just do an analysis and try to learn the strategies that they're doing and see what resonates with people. Like, oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have believed that that person believes that. Then it's not. Then the anxiety is no longer there. I think what you're ultimately going to get is you're going to get a Trump nomination. You're going to get Gavin Newsom as the candidate, and Gavin Newsom is not dumb at all. They're clearly keeping the seat warm for him. And I think you'll see a Trump versus Newsom election. I think Trump will win, but Newsom is very, very not only manipulative. I mean, they all are manipulative, but he's smart. He knows how to play the game better than anybody else, in my opinion, on the Democratic side, right? So I think that's where we're gonna head to. And then when Trump's elected, you're gonna see all the same crap rehashed yet again. Oh, he's a Russian agent. Oh, he's this. He's a racist. He's a bigot. They'll try to stonewall, the establishment will try to stonewall him. So he'll get as little done as possible, and he'll get some things done. Like, and I don't want to get into liking him or not, or policies, whatever, but because
Right.
people, are bifurcated and it's all confirmation bias, right?
Yep.
But you'll see all the same things repeated. The difference is, I don't think it'll resonate as much. It'll obviously
Yeah.
resonate with
A small
the
percent.
religious, the progressive religious
Yeah.
extremists. Yeah, but I think most normies, they've just gotten used to it, and they'll just be like, well, somebody's got to do the job. I don't want to do it. So yeah, I don't like him. Maybe he's obnoxious, but whatever. Just don't bankrupt the country, and we'll be fine. Is kind of how they'll look at it. And I know, by the way, and
Yep.
Bitcoiners like, the country's already bankrupt. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I get it. But you know what I mean.
You said
What
normies though.
normies think.
You qualify. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, exactly.
You said normies. Do you think in saying all that, do you think, and because I still think the greatest thing to ever happen regarding Trump was that he got elected. That was the change. That was like a breaking of the Republican Party. And now I feel like it'll be the breaking of the Democrat Party, the media, legacy media. It's the final nail in the coffin for them. How do you feel about that?
I think it's going to be a slow death for legacy media. Like it takes 2 generations to change a society, right?
Yep.
So, Trump was the first step of, let's say Trump was a step. I would argue the Freedom Convoy was a step.
Mm-hmm.
Millet was a
wars.
step.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. This October 17th was the step, sort of thing.
Yep.
This is going to go on for 30 years. It's going to be
Yep.
like this. There's going to be highs and lows. It's just going to be, and in 10 years from now, we'll just be desensitized to it, and it won't bother us as that much. And then once we're desensitized, size to it, and the rage bait doesn't work as much, then I think you'll see a new era of calm that starts to come into place. Like I still maintain we're headed towards this, Enlightenment 2.0, but it's just going to take a while to get there. I
Yeah.
think we'll get there in our lifetime, maybe not, maybe our kids' lifetimes, right?
Yep. And I think it's a great place to really end it. I think it's and until next time, but it perfectly coincides with Bitcoin being here, right? And adoption really probably over the next few decades getting to that point where all those things kind of come together and really kind of compound. So beautiful stuff, man.
And speaking of Bitcoin and Christmas, help
Yes,
orange
honking for
pill the
freedom.
normies. That's
Yes, we'll link to that.
honkingforfreedom.com. That's why
Yep.
I put 2 chapters. And by the way, I'm going to be doing something with Caribou in the new year. I mentioned
Nice.
him in my speech in El Salvador, and I always want to give a shout out to him because,
Yes.
boy, did that guy also stick his neck out for all of us. And we're going to talk more and more about that as we can. And congratulations to him for having a kid. He's a good dude. He really is. And then you and I are going to be in Vegas next week. Vegas, baby.
Yes. Vegas, baby. Vegas, baby.
Are you?
Hangover.
Yes. Well, no. I was thinking the movie Swingers. You ever seen the movie Swingers?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking.
My favorite.
Geez, I forgot about that. I was thinking of what's her name, Heather, whatever her name is, in Hangover.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know. I saw one a long time ago.
It's been a long day.
So I will see you in
BJ's
Vegas.
third
And
podcast for the day.
Are we going to do something like a political Bitcoin hour like this, or something like this in Vegas, or what?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. We'll do something like this. At the very least, we'll probably do that. We'll probably record it, go live, probably record it. And if not, at the very least, we'll probably do another one of these. I've got Murph on he'll do the 1s and 2s, and he'll get us set up, and we'll do that. And we'll have to collab with Nico and Opti. We'll have to get those. I know those guys will be busy.
Yeah,
maybe totally. Do something with those guys too, because Murph will be helping them. So we'll be good. Thanks, brother.
Cool. All right,
I know third one. I know you got to get some rest, man. Hell, it's the third one of the day already, so you're a busy man. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, I got lots of work to do for the next few hours, so it's me. Okay,
sounds good, brother. Appreciate you, dude.
Boy, oh boy, I told you this was going to be an incredible episode. I hope you were taking notes. BJ, like I said, is one of the smartest people that I've ever come across. I have the privilege to know him, a friend of mine, and only brought together really because of the Canadian Trucker Convoy and Bitcoin. So many friends, so many people I have come into close friendship now because of Bitcoin and the sound money movement, and really going across party lines in a way, and realizing that this is not orange versus blue, it's the state versus you. The fight isn't it's orange versus green. It's this real fight for the inner soul of our being, and BJ touches on that in this episode. And we're going to dive more, like I said, into some of these topics, the political entryism, and all these things that really kind of put a label on the things that are happening to us and help you understand what's actually happening behind the scenes, Hanlon's razor, etc. So I hope you're taking notes on this. We're going to dive more into this over time because, like I said, there's so many things. I have lists a mile long of things I didn't even get to with him, and so I'm excited to dive deeper into those things. But someone that, please, go check his book out, go follow him on Twitter, and go see and follow what he is doing, because he really is one of the biggest leaders, and he's not afraid. He's fearless, absolutely fearless, and he will do what needs to be done in order to achieve liberty for all people. Thank you for watching today. Please share it out. The algorithm truly does hate truth, so please share this out so we can minimize collateral damage. Trust but verify. Question everything with boldness, even the existence of God himself. I think that's something that really comes across with BJ, that saying right there. Question everything with boldness. And this is not financial advice, it is freedom advice. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one.